Hi, everyone. On this March 18th, I've got Chocolate, big, beautiful Chocolate, who, as always, sticks around. And Fluffy was here until 2 minutes ago. And then it's like he seems to know telepathically, I guess. And depending upon his mood, he either heads downstairs like, if you want me, you can come after me and play a game, which is what Fluffy loves. He loves to play games. And he may come sauntering in like he did a couple of weeks ago. And in the meantime, I cherish Chocolate. I cherish all of you in this day where it feels like something in the world is giving up and making us feel like we want to give up. We can't. We've really, really got to choose life, which means we've got to help each other. And we can help each other by staying far away. What a strange upside down world it feels like right now. But at least we can come together on these Wednesday nights without jeopardizing our life. And we can share some of these subjects that I think in the end can be some of the most important on the planet because we are denied so much information about them. And I'm not going to go into highlights on COVID-19, partly because it makes me sad, and partly because all news operations now are covering it 24/7, 365, as it needs to be covered. And so, with Dear Chocolate, as both a guy who likes to be in these YouTube live streams, and I wish I could do my script and hold him the whole way, but I can't. I'm going to put you down. He's like a Buddha. You're a beautiful creature, and he gives me kind of hope during this sad time. I'm going to put you down because the subject tonight, beyond COVID-19, is one of the more interesting and puzzling phenomena, I think, when you get to this whole big question of other intelligences in the universe and their relationship to us, and why is it so confusing and puzzling and not straightforward. And it is the Men in Black phenomenon. We promised a month ago after Peggy's poll about what high strangeness subject you would like to learn more about. And the most votes went to the bizarre, shadowy, even sinister Men in Black, also known as MIBs. And like this sketch done for me on February 16th, 1992, after a Lakewood, New Jersey adult male woke up to find this pointed chin character at the foot of his bed, wearing a black hat, black suit, black sunglasses that looked weird because they didn't even cover the being's slanted eyes. The MIB phenomena goes all the way back to June of 1947. On June 24th, 1947, fire equipment salesman Kenneth Arnold was flying near Mount Rainier in the Cascade Mountains of Washington, searching for a crashed military plane, when he saw 9 unidentified aircraft moving in formation, quote, like a saucer would if you skipped it across the water, close quote. Later, when he reported the strange, rapidly moving craft, his phrase, flying saucers, was echoed in news reports and reinforced by other people in various parts of the United States who began to photograph round discs in the skies, like this August 30th, 1951 photograph. It was taken by Carl Hart Jr. in Lubbock, Texas, who also photographed the second bottom pattern of UFOs over Lubbock. An official from a U.S. Air Force intelligence team confirmed on the record, quote, "These photos are legitimate," close quote, no effort to misinform. And said at the time that the United States Air Force was investigating. 3 days before, on June 21st, 1947, on the eastern shore of Washington State's Maury Island, 2 men named Harold Dahl and Fred Chrisman were in a patrol boat with Dahl's 15-year-old son and his dog. Dahl told Ken Arnold in the 1952 book by Arnold, The Coming of the Saucers, quote, "As I looked up from the wheel on my boat, I noticed 6 very large donut-shaped aircraft, at least 100 feet in diameter each, at about 2,000 feet above the water. 5 were circling around the 6th one that was stationary in the center of the formation," close quote. And then there was a dull thud from that center craft and an explosion of an estimated 20 tons of metal pieces. Some looked like dark lava rock, and others very thin and lightweight metal that looked like sheets of paper falling to the water, and both the dark and the light fell on the boat. The heavy dark metal damaged that boat. The next morning, eyewitness Harold Dahl was approached by a strange man in a black suit who took Dahl to breakfast. Dahl was puzzled that the man in black seemed to know all of the details of what had happened during the falling metals from the 6 UFOs. And then the man said that Dahl and Chrisman had seen something that should not have happened. And next came a threat. If Dahl loved his family and did not want anything to happen to his own general welfare, that he would not discuss the Maury Island experience with anyone. That was the first publicly reported MIB threat, but many, many more would follow, as you will hear in a moment. But first, I would like to share more details about Men in Black that came to me in 1989 from a military source about the Men in Black. He said, they are usually about 5 feet tall, olive-skinned or very pale skin like a corpse, and he used the word corpse. They wear human clothes that don't match the timeline of the encounter, often appearing in clothes from decades or even a century earlier. MIBs are genetically engineered humanoid counterparts to the praying mantis beings. I found that sort of astounding. I have been told by others that the praying mantises, the 8-foot tall ones, are a genetic creation from another galaxy to watch over, manipulate, and apparently monitor living forms in various kinds of solar systems. And so this man, when he said that to me, it was sort of consistent, but I still find this hard. MIBs are genetically engineered humanoid counterparts to the praying mantis beings, which allegedly are also a sophisticated android. Both MIBs and praying mantis types are said to be a genetic creation of tall humanoids from another galaxy, and their function is to monitor solar systems for millions of years, very consistent with other reports. When specific planets with living creatures are under study, genetic harvests are repeatedly done to analyze and manipulate the planetary life on specific planets. To do work on Earth, the intelligence behind the Men in Black deliberately take the form of human bodies as camouflage. But the military source had no explanation for why an extremely distant civilization would create androids to come to Earth and then harvest genetic material from humans and Earth animals. Like the first Maury Island case, when the Men in Black show up, they come with warnings to humans to not talk about whatever UFOs and ET encounters the humans have experienced. And the irony is, our U.S. government has had policies of lies since World War II to deny at all costs an alien presence on this planet. But keeping the general public from knowing anything about UFOs and an alien presence is exactly what the MIBs seem to want. So who is helping who and why? There is one UFO missing time and abduction case that led to a medical doctor who is the only person that I know about who had a man in black conversation in his own house until the MIB threatened the doctor in a frightening way. For this encounter, we go back to 3 a.m. on October 27, 1975, near Norway and Oxford in Poland, Maine, a little north of Portland. 21-year-old David Stevens and his friend, 18-year-old Glenn Gray, were listening to late-night music in their Norway trailer when a loud bang surprised them. Outdoors, they couldn't find any cause for the loud noise and decided in the early morning to drive over to Oxford's Lake Thompson. They had not driven more than a quarter mile when they later told investigators that, quote, an unknown force, close quote, pulled their car wheel away from them. Stevens later said, quote, the car automatically turned, and from then on, we couldn't control it, going over 100 miles an hour for 11 miles to a field in nearby Poland, Maine. This is where they saw two bright lights rise from ground level up into the sky like a helicopter. But they could see it was a huge cigar-shaped object the size of a football field, with red, green, and blue lights on the side. And then a very bright light suddenly struck their car, and both men blacked out. When they woke up, a couple of hours of missing time had passed. And when they started to drive, a force took hold of the car again and forced it to what was called Trip Pond, where a huge UFO, maybe the size of a football field, was waiting with two domed, saucer-shaped craft moving around low over the pond, and then it released gray smoke which surrounded them in the car. And then the sun rose. According to the 1990 book, UFO Cover-Up, What the Government Won't Say, by Larry Fawcett and Barry Greenwood, when David Stevens and Glenn Gray got back home, they discovered their hands and feet were swollen, their teeth were loose, there were red rings around their necks, and they had severe chills, like they had a bad fever. 2 months later, beginning in December of 1975 to January of 1976, David Stevens went through 8 sessions of hypnotic regression with a local allergist medical doctor. His name was Herbert Hopkins, MD, and he lived in Old Orchard Beach, Maine. Dr. Hopkins had a deep interest in UFOs and abduction cases, and he studied hypnotherapy. Many more details surfaced for Stevens under hypnosis, including a memory of being inside a very large UFO standing in a dome-shaped room. And he is quoted in the Loring book as saying, quote, a humanoid creature entered the room. He was 4.5 feet tall, dressed in a dark robe. His head was shaped like a big light bulb. He had slanted eyes, no hair, and no mouth, close quote. Then, against Stevens' will, he found himself on a table surrounded by 5 other entities who controlled him with a square machine that took skin and nail samples, hair and blood, and a button off of Stevens' jacket. He also saw a brown fluid that it was injected into him, and then the beings telepathed to him that this brown fluid would not hurt him. And then he said it was like he had been given a sedative. So where are all of the audio tapes and transcripts from the 8 in-depth sessions that Dr. Herbert Hopkins did with David Stevens, a man in black ordered Dr. Hopkins to destroy everything that he had on David Stevens' abduction, or he would be killed by having his heart moved to another dimensional plane. Next is a recorded interview done on September 11th, 1976, with Dr. Hopkins describing the man in black who showed up at Dr. Hopkins' home soon after those 8 hypnosis sessions with David Stevens.
The phone rang, and I answered. Man's voice identified himself as the New Jersey UFO Research Organization, the vice president of it. This has been checked out, and there is no such organization. And he wanted to know if he could come here and talk to me about the Stevens case. And I agreed to talk to him. So the man hung up, said he would be right up here. So I walked from the phone in the hallway to this door, turned on the light, and the man was already coming up the steps. I didn't ask who he was, I just opened the door and said, "Come in." So the man came in. He had the appearance of a clothing store dummy. His suit looked like it had just been put on and never had been worn, or even walked in for that matter. He wore a black suit, black shoes, black socks. It looked like a very dark blue shirt. It wasn't quite black. He had a black tie. He wore a derby. And you don't see derbies very often. And it was just as round and polished as could be. And I thought, this guy looks just like an undertaker. And when he sat down, he removed his derby. I thought, this character's as bald as an egg. He didn't even have eyebrows or eyelashes. It was a dark color to the eye. Smooth skin, looked like plastic, like a soft plastic skin, except that it was a dead white color, just plain white. His nose was very small, just a little pug nose, and his ears were small, set low and set far back. His lips were ruby red. Do you want to know about the Stevens case? And he spoke flawless English, absolutely textbook English, and no accent, just like you'd get it from a machine that could talk. I noticed that he wore gloves. It looked like gray suede gloves, and brushed his lips with the back of the glove. When he put his hand down, the back of his glove was bright red, and the red on his mouth was smeared. Then I could see that his mouth was a perfectly straight slit. Apparently did not have what we call lips. So the lipstick was put on as a decoy. I didn't see any teeth, by the way, and his head seemed to blend into his collar. He had a receding chin. He did not move his head at any time. He didn't turn his head. He did not nod. He was perfectly immobile. He told me that I had 2 coins in my left pocket, and he told me to take one of the coins out of my pocket and hold it in my hand. I put my hand in my pocket, and I took the larger of the 2 coins, and it was a bright new copper penny. So I held it up in my fingers. He says, "No, flat in the palm of your hand." And so I held my hand out like that and put the penny in the palm of my hand. And I looked at him. I looked at the coin. He says, "Don't look at me. Watch the coin." So I did. And it started to develop a silvery color instead of a coppery color. And then the silver became bluish. Then I had trouble focusing on it. I could focus on my hand perfectly well. That was my reference point to this. But the coin was getting quite fuzzy, quite out of focus, quite blurred. And then the coin just simply was gone. It just slowly dematerialized. It just wasn't there anymore. The coin just simply changed. That's all. Changed in color, first of all. It appeared to be silver, and then became bluish, and then got all out of focus. It didn't glow. It was not a glowing thing. It was just a sort of a fuzzy ball. And he asked me if I knew Barney Hill and Betty Hill. I said, well, I know of them. I think that Barney Hill is dead. And he says, that's right. And he says, do you know what he died from? I said, well, I understand he died suddenly, so I think he might have died of a heart attack. And he says, that is not exactly the case. The reason he died was because he knew too much, because he did not have a heart, just as you no longer have a coin. He then told me that I had tape recordings on the Stevens case, on the hypnosis. And then he told me that it was true. He ordered me to destroy the tapes, any other correspondence, and indeed anything I had in writing or otherwise that had anything to do with UFOs. Anything. Get rid of it. He said that he would know when I had done so. And also, he did leave a threat. If I didn't do so, I'd suffer the same fate as Barney Hill. He did say that he would know when I had gotten rid of the tapes. As he spoke his last words, I noticed his speech was slowing down, but not slowing down as a phonograph would, with a change in pitch. His words became slower and farther spaced, but retained the same tonality. He slowly got to his feet, unsteadily. And he said very slowly, my energy is running low. Must go now. Goodbye. Just like that.
Right after the man in black left, Dr. Hopkins looked for a car in his driveway. There was nothing to be seen and nothing could be heard. And that scared Dr. Hopkins even more. Had this just materialized and dematerialized like he did with the coin in Dr. Hopkins' hands? Well, he went back in the house and he physically destroyed all of the audio tapes of the 8 hypnosis sessions that he had done with David Stevens. And then he tore up all of his notes and transcripts and then burned them. What a loss. One of the world's experts about men in black, who has at least 1,600 MIB cases in his research files, is Ray Boeche, now in his late 60s. He has a doctorate of theology. He is a very devout Christian and long served in church ministry in Lincoln, Nebraska. Ray worked as a book editor and publisher at the University of Nebraska Press. And Ray has also investigated the UFO phenomena, trying to determine if the confusing intelligences behind the UFO mysteries are benevolent or evil or something in between. He and I have had many deep, long conversations about the true agendas of an ancient and alien presence on Earth for centuries. Back in the spring of 1994, Ray called to let me know that he had been contacted by 2 men who showed identification from the National Security Agency, the NSA, Fort Meade, Maryland, and the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, in Washington, D.C. The 2 agents wanted to discuss Ray's research about eschatology, a branch of theology that is concerned with death, judgment, heaven, and hell, or the end of the world as we know it. The 2 intelligence agents also wanted to read my then brand new book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, Facts and Eyewitnesses. I mailed a copy to Ray to give to the intelligence agents in Lincoln. And then on June 21st, 1994, I received a floppy disk from the agents by mail, who I will call the writers. Their 3-page letter to me about my new book included these words, quote, "The non-human entities, or NHEs, being dealt with in our psi weapons development, and who are apparently allowing themselves to be used for a time, are neither benevolent nor neutral." Linda, your comments and thoughts concerning ancient civilizations and their contacts with the NHEs needs to be considered in light of the bigger picture of the deception of mankind as a whole. It is only logical that given their non-human, other-dimensional nature, the NHEs would be able to foresee the need to establish a foundational base, the facts of which could be slightly twisted or distorted by the fog of antiquity and forgotten cultural distinctives. And that means to seemingly establish themselves as the bringers of all good things to humanity. But the ultimate manipulators are not human. Close quote. Ray Boeche plans to retire this year, and he wants to write a book about his 1,600 and some men in black cases. One is the David Stevens abduction in Maine on October 27, 1975. Because of the dramatic encounter that David's hypnotherapist, Dr. Herbert Hopkins, had with that strange, threatening man in black at Dr. Hopkins' home a whole year later in September of 1976.
And that's, to me, one of the most intriguing parts of the whole thing. People have these experiences. They don't share the initial experience with anyone. And yet, these entities are able to find them and give them these warnings. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. And my weirdest experience I've ever had took place as a direct result of Bert Schwartz sending me a bunch of information on the Stevens case. Two friends, we were each working on separate piles of papers chronologically so we could get a good idea of the sequence of events. We were in the house I grew up in Nebraska City. We were working at a table in my bedroom/office on the second floor of the house. And this would have been early evening. And suddenly we all realize we're overcome with this feeling of complete dread. We all sort of slow to a stop. We're not making any comments to each other. We're just sitting there. And this overwhelming feeling of dread and terror lasted for, it felt like 5 minutes, but it could have been a minute and a half or 2 minutes. But it was a substantial period of time. It gradually dissipated. And we looked at each other, and I said, "That was really strange. Write down what you felt." And so we each wrote it down, and the thing that tied it all together, we all felt that there was something inherently evil that was standing behind us, and we were afraid to turn around because of what we might see.
When you felt the sense of evil behind you, did you have any transcripts from Dr. Herbert Hopkins? Because he did do hypnosis with Stevens, and I wonder what it was. These were the transcripts that Dr. Hopkins destroyed because a man in black came to his house.
The most interesting part probably was the morphing of the UFO.
That was a signal that if you saw a helicopter above you after you had seen a bright light, or vice versa, that the helicopter could be the UFO world morphing to look normal to us.
Exactly, yeah. That 76, 77 time period was the time of all the overflights of all the northern tier stack bases. So the morphing from a UFO into a helicopter, that sort of thing, that was a thread that ran through a lot of those northern tier bases because they would think they were seeing helicopters turn into a UFO or vice versa over missile sites. That certainly ties in with the whole northern tier intrusions.
Have you ever had an MIB case that was positive to the person being affected?
Not that I can think of offhand.
So after 1,600 cases, all have been negative. when they show up, it appears to be associated with warnings, even threats to life, if humans talk about UFOs and ETs.
Yes, I think that's a fair statement.
And who do they represent? Where do they come from? And why do they do this for decades?
Excellent questions. I wish I had an answer. I think the government is as much at sea about this whole question as we are.
And it seems to me that one of the ironies is they chose policies of denial and threats to humans to keep humans quiet, while the government was trying to buy time to figure it out. And it's now 70-some years later, the entire field of UFOs, ETs, MIBs, and on is even more confusing. And it seems to me, if everyone had been told the truth during World War II, if that had been presented to the world human public in the context of we need every human to help us with sightings, with what happens, we need a world that is interacting with their governments, there may never have been any men in black because they would not have had people to be intimidated.
Absolutely. Transparency and honesty and openness, it's tough to go wrong with those.
The first person who reached out to the world public about men in black was Albert K. Bender, who founded the first major civilian UFO research organization. It was called the International Flying Saucer Bureau. It was founded on January 15th, 1952, and it was using those words coined by Kenneth Arnold in Washington back in June of 1947, flying saucer. The IFSB grew rapidly, and soon it had members and branches all over the world. And then suddenly, in March of 1953, only 15 months after it had started, Albert Bender shut it all down. He explained that in March of 1953, he had a visit from 3 men in black. They came to his house, and they communicated with Bender telepathically. And he said it was about the origin of UFOs. Afterward, Bender became very ill and very scared and said that's why he shut down the International Flying Saucer Bureau. Later, in 1962, Albert Bender would focus all of his high strangeness and what he said that he learned from those men in black about the origin of flying saucers in his book, Flying Saucers and the Three Men. It is a fascinating history of one man's efforts to understand an alien intelligence and then be scared away by men in black. Here now is Albert K. Bender himself in a recording that was played for the audience of James Moseley's 7th Congress of Scientific Ufologists in New York City on June 24, 1967, an excerpt.
I suddenly felt a strange chill over my whole body and could feel myself floating in the air above my bed. A strange message was conveyed to me, which was telepathic in its entirety. It went like this: "We have been watching you and your activities. Please be advised to discontinue delving into the mysteries of the universe. We will make an appearance if you disobey. We have a special assignment and must not be disturbed by your people. We are among you and know your every move. So please be advised, we are here on your earth." With this, the voice faded away, but I could sense something was watching me. My body seemed to drop suddenly, and I once again regained my senses and realized I was on my bed. The room was filled with yellow mist, and not far from my bed was a shadow, resembling that of a man, but as I made a move to rise from the bed, it vanished. The yellow mist was gradually fading, and my room was returning to normal. The smell of sulfur lingered in my room for almost 2 days. In July of the same year, when I returned from a summer vacation, I was visited by 3 men in black. We have heard so much about the 3 men in black since this first instance. They seemed to float off the floor, but wore clothes similar to an earth clergyman. They frightened me half to death, since I did not know they were present until I got a strange prickly sensation on the back of my neck, as if I could feel someone staring at me. When I turned about, there they were, looking at me from the center of the room, with their strange glowing eyes. Their eyes seemed to penetrate my very soul, and I experienced a burning sensation, extreme pain above my right eye. They did not speak, but I could understand the message they were conveying to me. It definitely was telepathic, and here's the message. You have dedicated yourself to the solution of the strange problem of unidentified objects in your atmosphere. Your interest is deep and sincere, and you have devoted many hours to it. We also know that such interest and determination might lead to something that could bring you harm. We feel that you are a very good contact for us on your planet Earth. You are an average person, and we know that what we tell you and show you will not be believed by anyone you might tell. You are not a person of great renown on your planet, therefore we have nothing to fear at present. We have a purpose for being here, and we will be here for some time yet. We must not be disturbed in our ultimate goal. As you see us here, we are not in our natural form. We have found it necessary to take on the look of your people while we are here. This is mainly used as a means of returning here without being detected by anyone. We have made numerous contacts with Earth by means of craft from our base. And at present we have craft hidden at a remote spot on your planet. We have found it necessary to go to great extremes at times to frighten off your Earth people, and it has resulted in some deaths. We also found it necessary to carry off Earth people to use their bodies to disguise our own.
I would very much like to hear from any of you who have had any encounters or interactions with a man in black, as has been described for this special tonight on my Earthfiles live stream. It would be very interesting to know if this kind of phenomena is still occurring in this 21st century. And while you were listening to the very interesting and important Albert Bender historically, I want you all to hear this is a text that I have just gotten on my iPhone. And remember, it was only about a month and a half ago when we knew that COVID-19 was starting, but the overlap was with all of the news about drones that had been happening from December to January. Listen to this. I wanted to let you know about what my sister just told me. She lives in Washington State, and they are in almost total lockdown right now. Last night, her daughter and many others filmed the sky over their town, that this would be in Washington, that had 30 or more drones flying over at night. She has videos if you would be interested, and I will request and I will find out more and report it next week. But needless to say, she goes on, her sister and the family there are scared to death. What are drones doing, 30 of them, flying in the night sky when everybody is locked down because of the COVID-19 coronavirus? So I shared this much with you just to see if there's anybody else now with everything quieting down and supposed to be almost, I think, still. Are light drones flashing, big, small, are they flying in the skies over other people's towns now? And if so, why? Who would it be? What would be the reason? So this is tacked on to this MIB report because I wanted to ask for feedback from all of you on MIBs, but also, would there be still a continuing drone mystery that we haven't heard about in news yet? And I thank you. I thank you, Roberta, for sending this to me now. And Peggy, I would be very interested in whatever feedback and comments that we are getting to tonight's MIB special from the audience who voted for this, and to see if they found this valuable and what questions people have.
Hi, Linda. First, I'd like to thank the Super Chats, and I think we might run out of time. The list is so long. So
all right.
Let me just first start with Lily Sherling. Thank you. Minnesota Folk, Melissa, David Goodridge, David Lemoy, P.S. Atlantis, Crystal Jade, Priscilla Munson, The Rabid Monk, S.J. Larson, Richard Gmail, Jonas J., Jackie Mathis, Moonbird,
Wow.
Irid Max, Exodasha, and Glincho. Thank you, everyone, for your super chats.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Everything helps. This is a complicated, tough world.
We have a wonderful question here about the Men in Black. Somebody would like to know, do you believe that the Men in Black are droids?
Yes, absolutely. Remember that part of my scripted story where I was talking about the man in the military who in 1989 talked to me about Men in Black, and he said they are like the praying mantises, that they are genetically created to do monitoring, the praying mantis specifically to monitor for apparently ages, millennia, maybe millions of years, incomprehensible to us, and that they are an entire genetic creation by some humanoids, not in this galaxy, another galaxy, and that they do solar system overseeing. And apparently working with the praying mantises, that was the implication, or somehow related, are androids, biological, to some degree, I guess, but in a category of being artificial intelligence, like the praying mantis. So the Men in Black, as I've been told, they deliberately are made to take on whatever form that they are to interact with. The puzzle is that they seem to be so cumbersome, and they always are exhibiting such a strange behavior that humans immediately react to them negatively. And if you go around threatening people with, as he did, what's interesting in that audio about the heart, when the question was what happened to Barney Hill, the man in black sitting with Dr. Hopkins said, what happened to Barney Hill? And he said, I understand he is dead, and that it was so sudden it must have been a heart attack. Betty Hill was sitting in that room when that interview was done with Dr. Hopkins about the Man in Black situation. And the interviewer turns to her and says, Betty, did they ever do anything that would show whether he had a heart? Did he have an autopsy? And she said no. So he was buried without an autopsy, and the implication from the Man in Black was that exactly as he had put the coin, had Dr. Hopkins put the coin in his hand, and then Dr. Hopkins watched it go from looking like a copper penny to a bluish color, and then it seemed to fuzz, and then it was gone. And that the Man in Black, talking with Dr. Hopkins in his house, said that that penny had gone into another plane of existence. That was the quote. And then before the Man in Black left, he asked about Barney Hill, with Betty sitting there, and Dr. Hopkins asked her if there'd been an autopsy, and she said no, and he was buried. Dr. Hopkins said, well, it certainly would have been interesting to see And the implication there was, as he said, that the man in black said to him, Dr. Hopkins, that if he didn't destroy everything that he had gotten on the David Stevens case, that what happened to Barney Hill's heart would happen to Dr. Hopkins. And apparently Dr. Hopkins was scared badly, and that's why he destroyed everything that night. The puzzle about so much of this is that seemed to be something we heard more about in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s maybe. But I wonder if men in black are currently interacting in any way with anybody. If any of you know anything about currency, meaning 2020 or 2019, I sure would like to know. Maybe it was something that was here for a while related to one of the intelligences that interacts with the planet, and that there are many, and maybe they have come in waves. Maybe they were working with the praying mantises on the first wave, because that whole reference by Ray Boeche to the fact that when we had the intrusions of so many UFOs in the 60s and the 70s in the United States, it was because the alien intelligence apparently was making it clear in a lot of human abduction cases that, as I remember in an interview I did, you humans do not understand that when you split the atom in making an atomic bomb or creating a hydrogen bomb, that you, quote, tear into other dimensions that you know nothing about. And that the emphasis in Dr. Hopkins' description of the discussion that he had with the man in black in his house, that the man in black twice would reference the coin moving into a different plane, a dimension, and then the reference to Barney Hill's heart and what would happen to the doctor. It is as if the man in black in that situation was basically saying, I can move anything from this dimension into another dimension. How did they do it? Why did they do it? Why are they here? What do they want? Those are questions that I understand General Eisenhower even asked in a meeting with General Twining, and nobody had an answer. I wonder, maybe no one in the Pentagon or any of the intel agencies really has a bottom line answer even now on March 18th, 2020. Maybe it's still very confusing, and especially confusing is what are the real agendas and who is truly friendly, who is truly hostile, and what is in between. That's a lot of what keeps me going in my work, trying to understand that. So let's see. We've got time for another question.
I have a great question about Valiant Thor. Does he still exist today?
You know, I have done readings since last week's program because Peggy said that people were asking about Valiant Thor. I don't have any journalistic answers to the questions that I've gotten around Valiant Thor, outside of the fact that there is a photograph of a man who looks sort of like a Nordic, who is supposed to be sitting in a meeting, and there are photos you can see on the web. But I can come into this question from another direction, from Bill Tompkins. Bill Tompkins worked with Ryan and his father, Robert Wood, on, I think, 2 books, but certainly the one I have a copy of. And it was about Bill Tompkins talking about how he was sort of an advanced teenager. He had a gift. He could go and look at any machine or any ship or any airplane and be able to go home as a teenager and scale model it to a T. And then his father began to realize that his teenage son, Bill Hopkins, was in fact quite correct. And then an admiral from the Navy called up the father and said, your son's models are in this store in Hollywood and we cannot allow it. They're too accurate, but we would like to come and visit your son. And then there was a meeting between the Navy and Bill Hopkins about what a great talent he had and that the Navy would like him to work for the Navy, only not in the public. And that Bill Hopkins then went to work for the Navy and said to me, in interviews with me, said to Bob Wood, said to others, that one of his assignments was to look at film and photographs of the UFO phenomena and then try to do scale models of what he was seeing. And he did scale models on all kinds of things and became an insider on what he said was a program in which blonde Nordic extraterrestrials were working in the Pentagon. This was after World War II. They were working in the Pentagon and that he and many others knew it. And then the third part of this I can contribute is that Info Swann was a great remote viewer, maybe the greatest of all time. And he said, he had talked to me separate from doing the book, which I hope, if none of you have read Penetration by Info Swann, you should read it. It's from a man who had a mind and a relationship with the fields around us that was different than most humans. And the story in Penetration leads up to somebody wanting him to see an extraterrestrial event and being able to get him to a place to watch something unfold. Well, Info Swann said that when he was in the Pentagon remote viewing, and this is part of his book, Penetration, that there were blonde clones, and they weren't Homo sapiens sapien, and that they were helping with the Defense Department and him and in various programs, and they were considered to be allies. So that would be the blonde Nordics identified as allies and the working in the Pentagon. And that's what Valiant Thor, all of the sort of mysterious sentences that you find in a variety of places about Valiant Thor, and there is a book that was written, I think it was called something like UFO in the Pentagon Pantry, that there's, if not hard data proof, there's at least a lot of smoke and fire around the whole question of blonde-haired, tall, very white-skinned beings. And in the women, Bill Hopkins said that they weren't tall, but they were blonde and blue-eyed and white-skinned, the ones that he worked with in his Navy work doing scale modeling for the Navy. And we all want, or I do, I would like hard facts. I would like to know exactly what the truth is and have evidence to support it and be able to report facts and truth. And the sad irony of all of this is that for the last 70 years since World War II, we've been in a nation where the government decided that nobody should know anything. And so those of us who have been able to bring some facts to you about all of this have had to work through a very difficult landscape. And that's what the Men in Black also, they were somebody's political editors. And if they came from another galaxy, why? What does another galaxy care about non-humans interacting with this planet where somebody tried an experiment and manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, as government documents state. It's the almost incomprehensible complexity of trying to ferret through all of the lies and the misinformation to understand and report what facts I can possibly find about us, who we are. Who are the alien presences that are on our planet right now, deep under oceans and seas, have been based on this planet before Homo erectus ever stood up? Why are they here? Where did they come from for real? And in this vast universe of 13.8 billion light years, there's even now arguments among astrophysicists that the universe could be even much older, or maybe much younger. So even at the level of astrophysics today, the amount of information and stories that are coming that challenge our ability to understand black holes, and could there be white holes, and are new universes being born that we don't know anything about through white holes coming from other universes. The myriad of possibilities, the multiple consciousnesses and levels of consciousnesses in different frequencies. It always takes me back to those first words in a book that has been around for a long time, and that opening sentence may be a key. In the beginning was the Word, capitalized, and word is frequency with intelligence. I think that's probably a fact. And tonight, I will say that I'm so glad that there's so many of you who are so interested in trying to find out the facts. And I'll keep trying to bring you as many as I can, and that I am praying every day to the divine field beyond matter and beyond time, that the coronavirus be swept away, and that we know a positive evolution, not a timeline of negative, but that if we all concentrate in our mind, in prayer, in meditation, if we concentrate on seeing, feeling, living a palpable path that is positive, filled with light, maybe we can move the needle. And on that, I love you guys. I love everyone. Please, please be careful.